November 30th, 1943, Empress Augusta Bay, Bougainville. 21:45 hours. Commander Katsumi Tomano, 38, captain of Japanese submarine I-19, surfaced in darkness off Bougainville to recharge batteries and search for American transport ships. For decades, Japanese submarines had owned the night surface. Superior optics, rigorous training, and aggressive tactics made Japanese submariners the most feared night surface fighters in the Pacific. Tomano's crew had trained for 10 years in night operations. They could spot ships at ranges exceeding 10,000 meters in moonlight. Their eyes, adapted to darkness, gave them advantage over American lookouts, who Tomano believed were inferior night fighters. The darkness was sanctuary, where Japanese submarines operated with confidence. But tonight, Tomano's periscope watch reported something impossible. An American destroyer, USS Charles Osborne, had altered course directly toward I-19 from 8,000 meters away. In complete darkness, no moon, no visual contact should be possible at that range. Yet the destroyer was coming straight at them, like it could see in the dark. Tomano ordered crash dive. I-19 submerged with barely a minute to spare before depth charges exploded overhead. The Americans had found them in darkness from impossible range with impossible precision. What Japanese submarine commanders didn't yet understand was that darkness no longer hid anything from an enemy equipped with radar. The rules of night combat had changed, and Japanese submarines were now the hunted, not the hunters. By late 1943, submarine warfare in the Pacific had evolved into complex cat-and-mouse operations. American submarines concentrated on attacking Japanese merchant shipping, strangling Japan's war economy. Japanese submarines, designed primarily for fleet actions, attempted to attack American warships supporting island campaigns. Both sides operated extensively at night, when visibility favored submarines over surface ships. Japanese submarine doctrine emphasized night surface attacks. Submarines would surface after dark, use superior optical equipment to locate targets, approach on the surface at high speed, fire torpedoes, and escape on the surface before escorts could respond. This doctrine worked effectively through May 42. Japanese submarines sank numerous American warships, including aircraft carriers Wasp and Yorktown. Using night surface tactics, the doctrine assumed darkness provided concealment that optical search couldn't penetrate beyond a few thousand meters. Japanese submarine officers trained extensively in night visual search. They developed techniques for scanning horizons, identifying ship silhouettes, and estimating ranges using calibrated binoculars. This training created confidence that Japanese submariners could see targets before targets saw them. American destroyer escorts and destroyers in 1943 operated with substantial technological advantage. Japanese submarines didn't anticipate radar, specifically the SG and SJ surface search radars that could detect submarine conning towers at ranges exceeding 15,000 meters in complete darkness. Through rain and in conditions where optical search was impossible, the SG radar, installed on destroyers and larger warships beginning in 1942, operated on 10-centimeter wavelength microwave frequencies. This relatively short wavelength allowed small antenna size while providing excellent resolution for detecting surface targets. The radar could distinguish individual ships in formation at 20,000 meters and detect small targets like submarine conning towers at 12,000 to 15,000 meters, depending on sea conditions. The SJ radar, designed specifically for submarine use but also installed on some surface ships, operated on similar frequencies with comparable performance. Together, these radars gave American surface ships ability to detect, track, and close on surfaced submarines long before submarines could detect the approaching warships visually. The tactical implications were revolutionary. For centuries, naval warfare at night had been limited by human visual capabilities. Battles occurred at close range, where ships could see each other, or they didn't occur at all. Radar changed this completely. Ships equipped with radar could fight effectively at ranges and in conditions where optical sighting was impossible. They could detect targets that didn't know they'd been detected, approach from optimal angles, and attack with surprise. For submarines, this transformation was existential. The night surface, once a submarine's safest operating environment, became a killing zone where American destroyers had overwhelming advantage. Japanese submarine commanders discovered this repeatedly through late 1943 and 1944, usually with fatal results. The Battle of Empress Augusta Bay on November 2, 1943, demonstrated the new reality. American destroyers using SG radar detected approaching Japanese surface forces at 30,000 meters in darkness. The American commander, Rear Admiral Aaron Merrill, maneuvered his cruisers and destroyers to optimal firing positions before Japanese forces were aware of American presence. When battle began, American ships knew Japanese positions precisely, while Japanese ships were still searching for targets visually. The engagement lasted 3 hours. American forces sank 1 Japanese cruiser and damaged 3 others while suffering minimal damage themselves. Japanese commanders reported being engaged by targets they never saw clearly. One Japanese officer, captured after his destroyer sank, stated during interrogation, "We fought ghosts that killed us without revealing themselves. We fired at radar blips and muzzle flashes, never at ships we could actually see." For Japanese submarines operating around Bougainville in the weeks after this battle, the implications were dire. American destroyers patrolling at night used radar to sweep areas systematically. When radar detected a submarine on the surface, destroyers would close at high speed, often getting within 3,000 meters before submarine lookouts spotted them. At that range, submarines had perhaps 2 minutes to crash dive before the destroyer reached attack position. Many didn't make it. Commander Yasuo Fujimori, captain of I-31, survived one such encounter on December 8, 1943. His post-action report, captured when he was taken prisoner after I-31 was sunk months later, described the experience, surfaced at 2200 hours to recharge batteries. Weather was overcast, very dark, good conditions for night surface operations. At 22:37 hours, lookout reported warship approaching from northwest, range estimated 4,000 meters. This seemed impossible, as visibility was perhaps 2,000 meters maximum. I immediately ordered crash dive. As we submerged, destroyer passed overhead at high speed, dropping depth charges. We escaped with moderate damage. Later analysis convinced me the destroyer detected us with some detection equipment before visual range. No other explanation fits the timing and precision of their approach. Fujimori's assessment was correct, though he couldn't know the specific technology. American destroyers had detected I-31 on radar at approximately 12,000 meters, tracked her for 10 minutes while closing, and attacked when range decreased to 3,000 meters. From the submarine's perspective, the destroyer appeared suddenly from darkness. From the destroyer's perspective, they'd been tracking a clear radar contact for 10 minutes and attacked according to plan. The psychological impact on Japanese submarine crews was significant. Night surface operations, previously routine, became terrifying. Submariners could never be certain whether destroyers were nearby. Darkness provided no security. Surface time for battery charging became rushed. Anxious procedures rather than relaxed operations. Crew effectiveness degraded under constant stress. Japanese submarine losses increased dramatically through 1944. Of 128 Japanese submarines sunk during the war, approximately 60 were destroyed in 1944 and 1945. Many during night surface attacks by American destroyers guided by radar. The loss rate was unsustainable. By 1945, Japanese submarine force was operationally ineffective, not from lack of submarines or crews, but from inability to operate safely even at night. Japanese naval intelligence eventually understood that American ships possessed some form of detection equipment superior to optical search. Interrogation of captured American sailors confirmed radar capabilities. but understanding provided no solution. Japan developed radar technology, but Japanese radar was generally inferior to American equivalents. Japanese ships installed radar beginning in 1943, but coverage was incomplete and performance was limited. More critically, Japanese tactical doctrine didn't adapt to radar warfare as comprehensively as American doctrine. American naval forces integrated radar into every aspect of operations. Combat information centers processed radar data, controlled ship movements, directed gunfire and torpedo attacks. Radar wasn't just another sensor. It was the primary sensor around which all tactics were built. Japanese forces used radar as supplementary equipment, supporting visual search rather than replacing it. Japanese doctrine still emphasized visual confirmation of targets before attack. This conservative approach meant Japanese forces didn't exploit their radar as effectively as Americans exploited theirs. When both sides had radar, Americans still held advantage. Through superior doctrine and integration, the destroyer USS Fletcher demonstrated this integration brilliantly on multiple occasions through 1943 and 1944. Fletcher-class destroyers carried SG radar, sophisticated fire control systems, and crews trained extensively in radar-directed operations. They could detect targets at 20,000 meters, calculate firing solutions using radar data, and engage with gunfire or torpedoes while targets remained invisible to optical search. Lieutenant Commander Harold Fulton, gunnery officer aboard USS Nicholas, a Fletcher-class destroyer, described radar-directed night combat in a 1944 after-action interview. Radar shows us everything within 30,000 meters. We see ships, submarines, land masses, even rain squalls. The radar plot in CIC tracks all contacts, calculates courses and speeds, recommends attack approaches. By the time targets detect us visually, we've been tracking them for 15 or 20 minutes, and we're already in attack position. It's not sporting, I suppose, but it's effective. We've sunk 4 submarines and 2 destroyers in night actions, all detected first by radar. This wasn't individual brilliance. This was systematic application of technology through integrated doctrine. Every American destroyer operated similarly. Every crew trained in radar tactics. Every combat information center processed data identically. The individual technical superiority of radar was multiplied by systematic tactical superiority in how radar was used. Japanese submariners did attempt adaptations. Some submarines reduced surface time to absolute minimums. Others surfaced only in extremely rough weather when radar performance degraded. Some attempted to monitor American radar frequencies using basic electronic receivers, surfacing only when no radar signals were detected. These adaptations reduced losses slightly, but couldn't restore the security night surface operations had provided before radar. After the war, Japanese submarine officers reflected on fighting against American radar-equipped forces. Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, who survived the war after commanding several submarines, wrote in his 1954 memoir about the radar challenge. "We trained our entire careers to fight at night on the surface. Our optical equipment was excellent. Our crews were skilled. But Americans changed the rules by seeing in darkness with electronic eyes. We couldn't match this technology, and we couldn't avoid it. Every night surface became risk we could not adequately assess. This uncertainty degraded our effectiveness as completely as direct combat losses. Submarine force that fears darkness has lost its primary advantage. The transition from optical to radar night combat represented one of several technological shifts that defined World War II naval warfare. Like aircraft carriers replacing battleships as dominant capital ships, radar replacing visual search as dominant sensor fundamentally altered naval tactics. Nations that adapted quickly gained advantage. Nations that adapted slowly suffered consequences. Today, every naval vessel worldwide carries radar as basic equipment. The idea of naval ships operating without radar seems as absurd as operating without engines. But in 1943, radar was revolutionary technology that completely transformed night combat. The U.S. Navy invested heavily in radar development and deployment, then built tactics and training around radar capabilities. This systematic integration decided countless engagements where radar-equipped ships defeated optically limited opponents. At the Naval History and Heritage Command in Washington, D.C., an SG radar antenna from a Fletcher-class destroyer is displayed with information explaining its significance. The placard notes that radar gave American forces decisive advantage in 28 of 32 night surface battles in the Pacific, mostly because Americans detected Japanese forces first, maneuvered to advantage, and attacked before Japanese commanders understood what was happening. A former Japanese submarine officer visited the exhibit in 1985. His comment, recorded by museum staff, reflected on fighting against technology he couldn't match. I commanded Submarine in 1944. We survived 9 months before being sunk. Every night surface was terror because we knew American destroyers might be nearby with radar we couldn't detect. We never knew if we were safe or about to be attacked. This constant uncertainty was perhaps worse than actual combat. In combat you can fight. Against invisible detection, you can only hope to be lucky. We weren't lucky enough. Most of my crew died in that final depth charge attack. Radar didn't kill them directly. But radar found us in the darkness where we thought we were safe. That made all the difference. The lesson extends beyond naval warfare. In competition, whether military or commercial, technological advantages matter most when integrated systematically into operations. Simply possessing technology isn't enough. Using technology effectively, training people to exploit it, building tactics around it, that's what creates advantage. Japan eventually acquired radar, but Americans had integrated radar into doctrine and training so thoroughly that even with similar equipment, American forces maintained advantage through superior application. The night surface was never safe for Japanese submarines after American destroyers arrived with radar. The technological shift was that decisive, that immediate, that impossible to counter with existing doctrine and equipment. Sometimes technology changes rules so fundamentally that adaptation is impossible without completely rebuilding capabilities. For Japanese submarine force, that rebuilding never happened. They fought the rest of the war at severe disadvantage, suffering losses that ended their effectiveness as strategic force. In warfare, in business, in any competitive field, the organization that adapts to technological change fastest usually wins. The organization that adapts slowest usually loses. American naval forces adapted to radar rapidly and systematically. Japanese naval forces adapted slowly and incompletely. The result was American dominance in night surface combat from 1943 onward. Darkness used to hide submarines. Then radar made darkness irrelevant. The submarines that survived were those that stopped relying on darkness for protection. Most Japanese submarines never adapted. Most American destroyers were equipped and trained for radar combat. The statistics reflect this disparity. In night surface encounters between American destroyers and Japanese submarines from late 1943 through 1945, American forces won approximately 85% of engagements, not because American crews were braver or better trained in traditional skills, because American ships had radar and tactics to use it effectively. Technology changes what's possible. Doctrine changes what's practical. Training changes what's routine. The U.S. Navy achieved all three. Japanese submarine force achieved none completely. That determined outcomes as surely as torpedoes and depth charges. The war at sea was decided as much by radar integration as by weapons themselves, and the side with better radar integration owned the night.